is around 1.1 trillion in value. So, moreover, we know that Indonesia has come up with the innovation that aim to integrate and interlink the financial services among digital banking, fintech, and also e-commerce. We have National Open API payment standard. We call it SNAP, and SNAP allow all parties to use one language to communicate more effectively without fragmentation. And the development of SNAP is aimed first to support the deployment of digital technology on banks, financial products and services, and second, to facilitate the acceleration of Indonesian digital economy and financial ecosystem. And we see the development of the cross-border retail payment service innovation in various countries, including Indonesia, is currently being driven by the global industry with its extensive network and global payment infrastructure between countries. However, there are still obstacles to cross-border payment, such as high cost, limited access, and also lack of transparency. And as a result, a breakthrough and enhancement is in one country technology and regulation and international cooperation are required for more inclusive digital economy. And consequently, every country needs to establish more efficient cross-border payment infrastructure through bilateral or multilateral cooperation with the partner country in the region and globally. Ladies and gentlemen, cross-border payment, especially retail payment, play a vital role in today's interconnected global economy. If we see the data, the volume of the global transaction is expected to grow in the upcoming years. For the past year, the value of the cross-border payment worldwide is increasingly from 127.8 trillion US dollar in 2018 to an expected 156 trillion US dollar in 2022. Thus, the emergence of the increasingly seamless and borderless global economy make it imperative for cross-border payment to become faster, cheaper, more transparent, and also accessible to anyone. For the last 3 years, the urgency to develop the cross-border payment and their interlinkage has become national, regional, and global concern. For instance, in Indonesia, the acceleration of the cross-border payment is mainly driven by the fast growing of transactions, primarily in tourism, remittances, e-commerce sector. Indonesia has already progressed in forging the cross-border economy interlinkage, especially on the payment connectivity, with the initiative expanding the adoption of the QR cross-border. On the global level, we see the G20 countries supported the Financial Stability Board, FSB, and also the CPMI and relevant international organizations have agreed to strengthen the cross-border payment. The G20 roadmap for enhancing the cross-border payment has launched in 2020 to address the challenges and provide guidance on developing payment connectivity. Following the initiative in Indonesia G20 presidency last year, cross-border payment was raised as one of the 6 priority agenda in the digital transformation, including through the payment system in digital era. Moving forward to the regional level, the implementation of the G20 roadmap to enhance the cross-border payment is reflected by the signing of the Regional Payment Connectivity MOU last year by the Asian 5 countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, and Thailand on November 14, 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, the Southeast Asia Central Bank Community has progressed with the concrete solution for the cross-border interlinkage with the start of the RPC initiative by the Asian 5 central banks. It will eventually expand it to all countries in the region. RPC initiative aim to integrate the cross-border payment infrastructure between countries by providing standardized way to its domestic payment system to speak each other. So this collaboration represents a key milestone in the Asian Payment Connectivity Initiative that strengthens and enhances the payment connectivity throughout the region and also promote the economic recovery. The RPC encompasses 5 interlinkage modalities, namely first the QR code, second the fast payment system, third application programming interface API, and the third real-time gross settlement, and the fifth is the data framework. And integrated payment connectivity among this region, utilizing this modality, would lead to an optimization of the existing partnership and the opportunity to expand the cross-border transaction market share and economic development. Development are needed to integrate the payment system between countries by considering the development principles such as efficiency, innovation, standardization, transaction speed, inclusiveness, expansion of access, and national interest. Naturally, such development require the involvement of various public and private parties, both domestically and also abroad. Ladies and gentlemen, case in point, Indonesia has started the implementation phase of the cross-border QR payment linkage with Thailand, 2022, recently with Malaysia. Meanwhile, the QR payment interlinkage between Indonesia and Singapore is targeted to launch by end of 2023. With the Philippines, we have the MOU. We just signed the MOU for the QR payment linkage. And we also have already signed the MOU with India and also with Korea and also with Japan. Cross-border QR allow users from the both countries to use their mobile payment application to scan the QR code on the merchant in this country. This breakthrough provides more options for users in a cross-border payment. And it serves a key, first, to improve the transaction efficiently. Second, to promote digital economic and financial inclusion. Third, to strengthen the macroeconomic stability by promoting more extensive use of the local currency for bilateral transaction. And going forward, the development of the QR-based services will leverage existing infrastructure. On another side, we see the account-based payment services will fully implement fast payment system interlinked by prioritizing the local currency settlement and multilateral linkages. This interlinking will coexist with the existing cross-border payment arrangement, such as a correspondent banking and closed-loop model, and yet be prioritized multilaterally as it expands access to cross-border services with a fewer connections. One currently implemented alternative is co-creation of a multilateral payment scheme within the Asian region, namely Nexus project, and also with the cooperation with the BIS Innovation Hub. This is the BIS Singapore. And moving forward, the RPC initiative could be expanded to include another country in the region, another Asian 5, and potentially other countries outside the region. These two mark the start Indonesian chairmanship of ASEAN with the key punchline, Asian-led cross-border payment connectivity from Asian to global. Ladies and gentlemen, challenge and risk must be considered in developing the cross-border payment system interlinkage, including, first, the differences in the country regulation. Second, variety of business models and processes. Third, the fast payment specification and membership, the fourth, industry resistant, the fifth, relatively high investment costs. Not to mention that it must also ensure the preservation of the state sovereignty and the continuity of national interest by prioritizing the principle of reciprocity that guarantee equal right in bilateral economic relation between countries. For this reason, various breakthroughs are needed. First, business model. Second, regulation. Third, technical. Fourth, operational. Fifth, institutional aspect, including strengthening cooperation between countries to make payment system interlinkage real. It is also demand innovation in the cross-border product and services, as well as a payment system architecture to be flexible toward the potential of digital technology disruption. Considering all, the interlinkage payment system initiative between countries are being built comprehensively. Countries are critical milestone in promoting economic recovery and financial interlinkage that has far-reaching implications for society, industry, and government. Ladies and gentlemen, on the final note, I would like to emphasize three important points. First, Indonesian and Asian digital economic and finance ecosystem show a positive trend and optimistic economic outlook. This is reflected through the signing of the RPC MOU by the Asian Five, and also currently starting from the Asian Five countries to the global level. And currently we have moved with the concrete initiative such as a cross-border QR, fast payment interlinkage among the 5 countries. And it is indeed another step forward in bringing the concrete example of the cross-border interlinkage from Asia to the global. Second, the future cross-border development has challenges and risks, leading us to the second point. The conventional cross-border transactions are known to be costly with the long processing time, inaccessible to a certain segment, and also lack transparency. Other than that, fostering cross-border payment interlinkage in the future involve many parties from different countries, and thus facing the different regulation, various business model and processing, and also the fast payment specification among those countries is inevitable. Not to mention that it must also ensure the preservation of the state sovereignty and the continuity of the national interest of its country involved. The third, lastly, to overcome the challenge and risk of the future cross-border development, the government, relevant authority, payment industry player should synergize in order to force the cross-border economic interlinkage. Cross-border interlinkage is not an easy thing to do and require the involvement of the public and the private party, both domestically and abroad. Authority should commit and be ready to support the strategy and the initiative of the cross-border economy interlinkage. On the other side, the industry player also should be ready to capture the opportunity and create innovation both on cross-border products and services, as well as the architecture of the payment system. Ladies and gentlemen, as the white man said, a goal without a plan is just a wish, and a wish without action is nothing. Today's discussion is only the starting point that needs concrete implementation in our real world. Industry, society, and regulator should synergize and innovate to accelerate digital economic transformation. And I believe FEKDI 2023 is just a yearly snapshot of the journey toward that goal. Finally, we hope that FEKDI 2023 can be a moment to a momentum to strengthen policy synergy and facilitate collaboration through synergy and innovation that accelerate the digital economic, build sustainability, and also support post-pandemic economic recovery. Hopefully, God Almighty will bless and lighten our step. Thank you for your participation, collaboration, and continued support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Filianingsi. Ibu Filianingsi, can you please remain on stage? For next, we'll be having a photo session. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for Leaders Insight from Ibu Filianingsi. And I would like to also invite onto the stage to join the Deputy Governor of Bank Indonesia to take a photo, Ibu Rosmaya Hadi, Mr. Diki Kartikoyono, and our panelists as well, Mr. Paul Gui, Mr. Shadab Tayabi, Mr. Yebe Haryantono, Mr. Tigor Siahaan, Mr. Ben Liu, Mr. Vince Iswara, Mr. Budi Ganda Subrata, and Mr. Kaspar Situmorang to also please come up on stage to take a picture together for the second day of the Festival Ekonomi Keuangan Digital Indonesia, or FEKDI 2023. And ladies and gentlemen, we will be taking 2 photos and I will do the countdown, so please do allow me. Are you ready, ladies and gentlemen? Documentation team ready? Journalists, media ready? On the count of 3. In 3, 2, 1. We'll be taking another photo in 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please give a round of applause once again. And you may now return to your seat. And ladies and gentlemen, we have together listened and gathered for Leaders Insight, one of the main agenda for today's event. But next, we will also be having 2 casual talks. Therefore, do please stay with us until the end of today's event, for we will be also having a Kahoot quiz with very interesting prizes. And each and every one of you, either if you're joining us offline or online, can participate and also try your luck in winning the wonderful prizes available. And ladies and gentlemen, before we begin or continue for our casual talk, or our first casual talk of the day, I would like to also remind you, for those of you who need an interpretation feature, we do have it available for you, either if it's offline or also online. For those of you who are joining us offline here at the Jakarta Convention Center, if you need the interpretation device, all you have to do is please do raise your hand, and our committee will be more than happy to assist you. We'll be having 2 languages, Bahasa Indonesia and also English, for you to use which one you feel is more necessary, ladies and gentlemen. And for those of you who are joining us online, there is also an interpretation feature available on your device. Please do choose the language you prefer, which is Bahasa Indonesia or English. So ladies and gentlemen, we will continue to our next session, which is our first casual talk of the day. This session is aimed to widen our knowledge on how cross-border interlinkage between ASEAN 5 countries will broadly create payment system integration and drive all features and mechanism of cross-border payment transaction. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for our first casual talk with the topic, Private Sector's Role in Forging Cross-Border Economic Interlinkages. Presenting 4 panelists from related association, this session will be moderated by a senior journalist. Therefore, please join me in welcoming onto the stage Ms. Kania Sutisna Winata.
Very well. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello and a very good morning to all of us. Let me introduce myself again. My name is Kanya Sutisnawinata, and it is my pleasure to be moderating this next casual talk. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us on this morning casual talk on private sector's role in forging cross-border economic interlinkages. Perhaps as we have heard earlier, much needs to be done in order for us to move forward with our key agenda, namely payment system integration between ASEAN 5 countries. Not only will it be of great benefit to the economy, but it can also provide opportunities for innovations and also better products for the people. But not only that, today's economy that are becoming more digital, more interconnected globally demands for all of us to improve the way we handle our transactions, specifically cross-border payments, which, as Ibu Fili said, is expected to be growing in the upcoming years. So moving ahead requires for cross-border payments to become faster, cheaper, more transparent, accessible to anyone, and above all, secure. And how to do this? Synergy with financial industry players has been a lesson learned throughout the development and implementation of the Indonesia Payment System Blueprint, as was elaborated previously by our Central Bank DG, Ibu Fili. So I guess it is only natural for us to hear more from the side of the financial industry players in the region, what they have to say about playing a role in accelerating in these efforts and also overcoming challenges together. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's welcome our distinguished panelists to please come join me on stage so we can start our discussion. First and foremost, let's invite Mr. Paul Gui, Secretary General of ASEAN Bankers Association. Please welcome. Next, Mr. Shadab Tayabi, President of Singapore FinTech Association. Please welcome. Mr. Yebe Haryantono, Vice Chairman of Indonesia Payment System Association, or ASPI. Please welcome. And last but not least, let's welcome Vice Chairman of Indonesian Bank Association, or Perbanas, Mr. Tigor Siahaan. Please welcome. A very good morning, gentlemen. It's a pleasure for us to have you joining us in this casual talk. It's supposed to be a casual talk with a very important topic, and we only have about 45 minutes in between the four of you to put as much perspective and also insights into what the industry players are doing in this particular subject. I want to dig deeper on the role, the challenges, and also maybe share some of our experiences, best practices that we can emulate on a regional level. Because on a country level, we are seeing across Asia today a revolution, if we can say so, a revolution in digital technology and telecommunication that has made a great impact on financial services and also payments in at least the last 3 decades. You know, I'm accessing my bank account from my phone. I can do instantaneous transfer and also buy goods and services online. And perhaps within country, these new ways to access digital financial services have made payment systems very efficient, inexpensive, and more so also more inclusive. But when we talk on the regional level, that's another case. So we want to know how and what our industry key players are thinking about these efforts, about the initiatives that has been talked about earlier in the Leaders' Insight. Let me start with Pak Paul, who is representing the ASEAN Bankers Association. So perhaps you have a more wider take on how ASEAN banks in particular are responding on establishing a faster, cheaper, more transparent and inclusive cross-border payments. But how do you see so far, Pak Paul, the ASEAN banking sector role in optimizing ASEAN's economic potentials by way of a better payment system in between nations?
Thank you, Ibu Kanya. And first of all, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to PI, to Perbanas, and also ASPI, and to, for the invitation to be here to participate in this very keynote, as you say, flagship event in Indonesia. So this is very exciting for us to be present here. So you mentioned about how do you see, banks in ASEAN looking at payments and connectivity. I think this goes back to in the time when 2019, right before the COVID event, we had a very insightful or meaningful dialogue with our central bank governors, and one of the things in Chiang Rai, where we proposed about the using of a QR code payment. So there begins our journey, and we are grateful that this has already embarked even further to what we see. I think Ibu Filia has actually put out lots of development, and we are together working with the governors and also with our member banks. And for us, one of the things that we have done is to finalize together with the payment system providers in ASEAN, where we have now published a guide for implementation of cross-border QR payment. So there is already now a working paper, a working guide that will be helpful for those who are beginning to embark, especially for the other non-5 that are looking at how best they should organize themselves. And I think you mentioned the role of banks. Banks are actually very critical and significant in this ecosystem that we have here. As you know, banks place in it, without banks, which is, being trusted. I think the word is trust here. Then, a lot of the payments or things that you want to transact would be very difficult to do, because customers down the street may not be sure whether, should I use this payment provider, or should I use how do I transfer my money? So the bank has a very significant role. Obviously, I think the other players in the ecosystem is also just as important, especially my colleagues here from FinTech, the payment service providers and all that. So that's how I see it. Thank you.
But how do you see the role of traditional banks evolving as we are seeing payment methods such as real-time transfer and also QR code payments becoming more widespread in ASEAN?
I guess, I guess the traditional banks will continue to be bank. We will be, and I think at the time when, this issue about fintech coming up, and, how does banks, operate, or would banks then be, or would fintech be one that, challenge the banks, which I think they do, which is for good competition. And as you see, some of the developments of the QR and real time, it's actually being spurred on a lot by the fintech. Yeah. So in terms of traditional, we will still be a facilitator. We'll be there to ensure that end of the day, when payment is made, it is, it reaches the destination of the customer, and whoever it is will receive good value of money, good value funds. So without that, sometimes when you use a remitter, you do not know whether you may receive that money or not. For a bank, it is there. You get paid, and whatever that you are, put through the transaction, the banks will make sure that, end of the day, the amount reaches to the destination and to the beneficiary.
Okay.
So,
Okay, but before I go to Pak Shadab, I want to jump into Pak Tigor, which is also from the Banking Association based here in Indonesia, or Perbanas. I want to hear your perspective, maybe perhaps the same question that I have just asked earlier to Pak Paul, but specifically on payment methods. How prevalent do you think are real-time payment and QR payment systems in the ASEAN region? And what has been the experiences like for Indonesia?
No, thank you, Kania. First of all, I think there's a few points that I'd like to make. One is, I think Bank Indonesia has the foresight to make this push, this QRIS payment a few years back. And I remember a lot of banks were a little bit, I wouldn't say resistant, but uneasy. Because, it's a change. Banks make money certain ways and certain methods and everything, but there's a big change coming, right? And not just banks, actually, a lot of closed loop players are very much uneasy. We got to think, now we're talking about 30 million users, going to be 45 million users, but in the beginning it was a bit rocky. I don't know if you remember that, Bufili and others, but I
you
think
made it happen.
But now we got 30 million users and counting. The fees are different than what it used to be, but it really democratizes the financial inclusion all throughout. So I think that's a good thing. Second, the numbers we're talking about, we're going to get to 45 million by the end of the year, 1 billion transactions this year. Sounds like big numbers. But if you peel the onion, 1 billion transactions out of 45 million users, that translates to about 20 odd transactions per year, per user. That translates into 1 to 2 transactions per user per month. We're talking about 1 billion, but it's actually 1 to 2, let's call it 2 transactions per user per month. That's actually still barely scratching the surface. So it's actually still very, very deep. UPI, for example, in India, I think they do about 2,000 transactions per second. I think about 60 billion per year and counting, right? So, and that continues to evolve. So I think we're at this number. It's great, lots of progress, but I think we're still scratching the surface. And that's the same thing I would say with whether it's prompt pay, do it now, pay now in Singapore. And as the deepening of each market continues, I think it's great that the ASEAN connectivity, while the deepening of each market continues, plays that role as well. There's a lot of interconnectivity between the regions. For example, TKI, TKI in Malaysia itself. TKI is Tenaga Kerja Indonesia, the foreign workers in Indonesia, working in Malaysia and Indonesia. If you ask so many different people, nobody has the right numbers. Is it 5 million? Is it 3 million? Is it 4 million? But it's in the millions, right?
Right.
And just an example, these guys are paying through the roof in terms of the charges because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
They're paying through these middlemen. They're getting, maybe it could be 5-10% of what they're sending, and they don't know any better.
Yeah.
So with these kind of interconnectivity, there's so much value. There's so much financial inclusion that we give these guys, and it actually helps to their well-being, financial being, and the livelihood of these guys without us realizing it. But
Right.
it makes a big, big difference. So maybe I'll stop there because I know The time is limited.
The time is limited. So let me just thank you so much for that perspective. You're saying there are a lot of opportunities and we are only scratching the surface.
Absolutely.
And the jump can be scary at first. The jump can be scary at first. But going back to what Pak Paul was saying, now I want to go to Pak Shadap and I'm not telling you to shut up. I'm sorry, I just needed to say that. But
easy to remember.
Right, you get that all the time, I bet. But I'm just wondering, what is the experience like for fintech players? You know, Pak Paul are saying that, you know, some of the innovations that we are seeing across the financial platform, financial services are introduced by way of fintech. But do you see yourself as a disadvantage? When we talk about cross-border payments, banks have a really big role I mean, in terms of the system. Do you see any loophole in creating a better system than what we are seeing right now, or what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. Thank you, Ibu Kania, first of all, Kania, for having me here. And also really thankful to BI and ASPI for inviting us here. It's a pleasure to be here after a very long while, to be honest, after COVID. So just to answer your question, I think specifically we have to look at it from a slightly different angle, right? Where did it all start? I think to a certain extent, and I'm not here to criticize anyone, the reality is we all know where it all started. Basically, the payments, as Pak Tagore has also highlighted, the costs involved, the speed or the slowness that was there, and also the inclusivity and the transparency in the cross-border payments has been a challenge for many, many years. And it's not the businesses specifically or the more affluent customers who actually generally so-called are the receiving end of that problem, but mainly the retail mass customer base or the migrant population across the globe that have been the most impacted. And I think that is where, like all fintech companies do, found an opportunity to bring efficiency, to bring innovation, to reduce down the costs, to create more transparency in the process, and also to bring more inclusion or inclusivity for the other players as well. So the way the fintech companies have approached this is, of course, through multilateral collaborations, but also expanding on the network and also building their own network as well. So there are quite a few players, specifically, I mean, I represent the Singapore fintech's ecosystem. Our payments segment is probably the largest in our whole set of 800 plus companies that we represent. Our payment subcommittee is the biggest as well, and we work very closely with the regulator. So the cross-border payments space has been very much, I would say, brought to life or have been really progressing with the advent of players like Thunes, Ripple, Niam, one of our large unicorns as well. They have tried to nip the problem in the bud by creating that efficient infrastructure and that cross-border connectivity, in addition to what was already there. Okay. Using the advent of digitalization and also the mobile penetration as well.
Okay, but
so that provides that perspective.
Okay, so how do you see the future of cross-border payments?
It's only going to get cheaper. It's only going to get faster. And it's only going to get more inclusive as we go along. Future is definitely bright for us. And I would really highlight the fact that it is only possible because we have very strong collaboration with the public sector, and we have very forward-thinking and collaborative regulators like BI, like MAS, like Bank Negara, and Bank of Thailand as well. The regional payment connectivity that Ibu Felia talked about earlier as well, it does show how important the public agencies are also seeing this, and the private sector, including the fintech companies in Singapore, are very much collaborating with the likes of BIS as well in pushing this agenda forward. And one of the, I would say, key success factors has been this regulatory sandbox that some of the players have, some of the jurisdictions have created as well. And we have benefited from it. Our fintech companies have benefited from it. Of course, with the consumers benefiting from it ultimately. So I think the future lies with more and more collaboration with the public and the private sector coming together in defining these rails and creating more efficiencies in the interconnectivity and interoperability as well.
Okay, very well. Let's go to Pak Yebe then to share his experiences as well. He's the Vice Chairman of Indonesia Payment System Association. Could you share perhaps how the Indonesia Payment System Association, in this case ASPI, who has played an active role in modernizing payment systems in Indonesia, what are its role basically to forge ahead cross-border payments initiative?
Okay, thank you, Mbak Kania. I think when we are talking about the ASPI itself, ASPI is SRO, self-regulating organization. We are the representative of the payment industry in Indonesia. Yeah, so if we are talking about the current ASPI itself, the members are around 200 institutions, 50-50 between banks and fintech. So all the payment players are there. Yeah. So ASPI itself, as we are the representative of this payment industry, we need to develop the payment industry as well as safeguarding them, make it running well in the country itself. Yeah. Other than that, we are also standard organizations. We are developing standards for all the payments. Yeah. For example, that Indonesia itself, we have the debit card, ATM card standard on the chip, something like that. Those are the standards that are being developed by association itself, the ASPI. Yeah. So as well as when we are talking now today, we discuss a lot on the QR payment. QR payment in Indonesia, the CRIS standard itself, also the standard being developed by ASPI, yeah, together with guidance from the central bank itself. Yeah. So those are the role of the ASPI itself. In the things that we have done, in the context of the cross-border itself, yeah, when we are talking about the cross-border payment, Indonesia is quite lucky because we already have the QR standard for Indonesia, CRIS, so we already been in the one system, mechanism, something like that. So when we connect to other country, something like that, we have done the connectivity with Thailand and Malaysia. So Indonesia can be represented by one standard, something like that, going connected with this country. And ASPI role itself, when we are talking about the cross-border standard, we are involved in the discussion of technical specifications, yeah, because when we are connecting to any other payment system, technical specification to make these two system of these two countries working well, we need to be agreed on the technical specification and architecture. Other than that, we are also involved in the commercial discussions, how the business model of this cross-border CRIS, as well as we are talking about fees, all these fees that needs to be involved into this. Yeah. Other than that, actually a lot of parallel discussion happening, talking about security standards, data privacy, etc. So those are the involvement of this ASPI in this cross-border. Thank you.
Very well. So going back to Paul, tell us a little bit more on what you're seeing right now in terms of best practices around the region. What are the lessons learned, do you think? I mean, in terms of overcoming challenges together, maybe you could share a little bit on some concrete stories that you've been hearing around the region, which maybe can be implemented on a regional level. Which country do you think is leading the way in terms of modernizing payment system? Is Indonesia a case in point? What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. I think, yes, of course. I think one of the things, best practice that we can see, as shared by Bu File, our Deputy Governor from BI, you can see some of the developments which has been shared. And many of them, I think, are, how you say, kind of examples that could be followed by other countries. And in terms of the leadership, one I think is that, like also YB was saying that, the practices of the design and the business model and so forth, I think that is something which more could be done in terms of sharing the design upfront, so that, when we come to discussion, we can be able to close the loop more quickly. And as I mentioned as well, and that, people to people is the most important. because if you don't understand one another, it's very difficult to look at, because the other side will say, I'm already doing this in the best practice, but on the other side may not understand what you're saying. So that's something which I guess, in practical terms, that we should be able to come together like this. And also one of the things that I think which Indonesia, given the chairmanship this year of ASEAN, which is, the leader, could even organize more of this kind of discussion amongst the players to come together. Because we know that when we have bilateral, it's only 2 of us. But if all the 5 or everyone sit down, we could be even doing far greater work, and even better solutions could be found together.
Pak Tigor, so let's talk about the major challenges, do you think, that banks are facing in adopting, let's say, the latest payment methods, real-time transfer, QR code payments, within countries and across nations? What do you think are the major hurdles and how to overcome them?
I think there's a couple of things, right? One is the availability of the digital infrastructure in Indonesia as a whole. Indonesia is a wide, spread out country, right? We're talking about, 70,000 odd desa, villages all over the place. Not all of them are actually have access to the digital infrastructure, right? So I think that's one. I think it's very imperative. Even in the urban areas, kadang-kadang kita wifi juga suka lemot gitu.
Right.
Right? So it's not, apalagi di desa-desa, especially in the villages, in the rural areas and everything. So I think that's very, very important, and it's imperative for us to put that platform all across Indonesia, right? Because otherwise that leads to all kinds of issues. Second is, I believe that the financial literacy, a lot of people, even today, even though if they have a mobile phone, they have access to QRIS, sometimes when they want to transfer, they want to do something, they go to an agent. I don't know why, they do it. In many rural areas, they still do it. Kawarung and everything, tolong dong ini, dan bayarnya mahal.
Right.
And they still pay the expense, but it's easier for them to talk.
It's another form of intermediary, I guess.
Exactly. But they like it. Maybe they talk and they say, hey, apa kabar? How's the baso here? And all that kind of stuff. So that's still a high-cost economy, I think, to Indonesia. While the infrastructure is there, but the literacy, the education for them to say, hey, you don't have to do this. And I think that needs to continue. And I think once you do that, I mean, if you look at China, for example, that's been digitized, it's hard to do anything without having a QR code. It's hard to be a beggar in China without having a QR code, right? And that financial education, that thinking is already embedded all across. And as a result, the economy is actually pushed to a different level. The access to financing is available. The access to payments is available. The access to non-banks financing is out there. So I think once we do that, the infrastructure, the education, the literacy, then I think we can really lift up this economy to a different level.
Okay, do you feel that way, Pak Yebe? You keep looking at me. What do you think are some of the challenges that we are facing right now? How to overcome these hurdles in implementing a real solution on a regional level in terms of cross-border payments?
I think when we are talking about cross-border payments, the terms of payments looks like it's something generic. All over the world, payment is just payment, So when we go into details connecting one to another country, there are things that is generic, there are things that is unique in every country, So when we are talking about certain things that is generic, it's okay. Similar things, then we can quickly settle those things. But there are a lot of things that is quite specific that happens.
Yeah.
One another country is different.
Yeah,
So those
yeah.
are the things that
Because
we need to have.
Patigor was saying the case of
the
Indonesia. We don't
challenge, I
know
think.
what's
Yeah.
happening in Singapore and Malaysia. It's all different approach.
It's all different, yeah. So every country will have their own uniqueness. Those are the things that is quite challenging for us, especially when we are talking about this cross-border payment on the QR. It is a bilateral. One another country, two countries connect together, something like that. So the challenge is not just on the technical side, yeah. For sure, we understand that technical, we need to connect. There are things that we need to make a system to be compatible and talk to each other. But also on the business model, yeah. When we are talking about this kind of payments, for sure, a lot of infrastructure has to be there, a lot of investment, a lot of fees also will happen to all these players. It's a lot of parties that is involved. So one to another country, the model of how fees are being distributed, who is charging what, something like that, is quite different.
Right.
There are things that, again, yeah, there are things that is quite common, but there are things also that is quite unique. And one to another country is different. So those are the things that a lot of discussions need to be happen on this area. So I think those areas, technical and commercial. Yeah.
Technical and commercial. Do you agree with that, Pak Shada?
Absolutely. I can't agree more on that. So just to give you some numbers there as well, right? So
Because Indonesia and Singapore, I mean, as was mentioned earlier, is actually
yes, we are starting to work on that.
Yeah.
But we have already, Singapore has already launched with a bilateral with PromptPay in Thailand, do it now in Malaysia, UPI in India as well. And all these are individual bilateral connectivity, cross-border connectivity of the instant payment systems, the IPS, as some technical people define them. So just to give you a perspective, there are 60 plus instant payment systems around the world, different countries, right? And what BIS is doing for Asia, and to start with ASEAN, is quite unique, because that's where Nexus comes in, the project that has been talked about earlier. And they have started with 5 to start with, but the challenges that Pak Vaibi also mentioned earlier, and Pak Tigor also, there are technical challenges, there are commercial challenges, and also the place where it all started. So the systems may sound very similar, because it's ultimately paying from one account to another account instantly, but they may have very different mechanics in terms of how they are settled, whether there are in certain cases, you may be surprised that even though it shows instant settlement, but there is some kind of credit given at the back. There is the funds are held somewhere else.
Yeah.
So all these challenges make it very difficult to have that interconnectivity, bilateral interconnectivity. But with Nexus, the idea is to bring all that together so that you go through that challenge once, and once you're connected to that main hub, you are able to have that multilateral connectivity easily. So hopefully that will solve that problem. And some of the fintechs have already done that. We can probably learn from them as well.
How long is that going to develop, like this kind of system? I'd like to go back to Paul. You mentioned earlier that you are publishing a guideline for the financial industry players, especially in the payment sector. What do you think are some of the steps that you are recommending for these bank or fintech players or payment players to do at the initial stage of forging cross-border payments?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think one of the things is, first and foremost, as mentioned by, Pak Sadap, is that, in the space of bilateral, you need to negotiate, each other to discuss a lot of the, first and foremost, whether it makes sense, to have I think yesterday also was mentioned in the governance that, it has to be economics. Because at the end of the day, no one wants to do, kind of a bilateral if there's no economics. And it's not, how you would say, a charity, right? I think everyone would know, end of the day, there is a need to make some money, or made at least some good money, if possible, unless it's a public good that will be there. That's something which I think the way that it will be resolved is to see how some parts of it would be, to be based on a way that the government will be able to support it, and the rest is maybe private sector development. So that's something I see, and I think for cases like, coming back to the bilateral and how do we get started, it's come and in this sort of setting to discuss, and especially using the implementation guidelines to start it as a base for you to be able to see how where you can begin that journey, because it's a journey, right? It's not something which I say I want to do bilateral and tomorrow I can start doing the bilateral.
Yeah.
Even because the infrastructure, as was mentioned, is most important. And I think technology, which was mentioned, is an enabler. But I guess, technology is always be able to be modified, or, to be changed, or to be, developed to solve the problem. But end of the day, the most important problem is how, like Pak YB was saying, is the policies that has been set.
Okay.
Yeah. So if the policies are not agreed and there are differences, then no matter how much you want to push it, you need to get that resolved as it is. Yeah. And and I think Pak Sanda was saying that for moving to multilateral, why is the reason to move to multilateral? I think the reason is very clear. In bilateral, you do, for two, you can do one iteration. But when you come to 5, you're doing 10 iterations. So that's quite a challenge, right? And if you look at 10 ASEAN, that will be actually 45, bilaterals that you're going to do it. So that will be a challenge for also YB in looking at the technical design and operational. So we hope that we can move to multilateral as we move along.
Okay.
Thank you.
But at the initial stage, what should be the focus on? Like when we talk about cross-border initiative, that should be prioritized by ASEAN countries.
I think end of the day, I think the concentration should be how to have that agreement, and also in terms of the scheme that you agree, because technology is something which is probably given, in many ways. It's a scheme that agreed between two parties. How do you want to share? How you want to, especially on security as well. As we know, I think recently there are some issues about QR code being scammed. So that's also another area that we need to agree on standards, basically, on applying the international standards, even for, QR, we are using, or EMV kind of a standard. So this is something which we need to discuss and agree on from there on.
Okay. Pak Tigor, any thoughts on this? I mean, you talked about how literacy is a very important, especially in the case of Indonesia. Talk to us more about security. This is one key aspect of making sure that not only the adoption of, let's say, the latest method payments, QR, and also instant real-time transfers are widely adopted, but how do you make sure that the people trust the payment system they are using?
No, I think that's absolutely key, right? I mean, the security and the fraud aspects of it is really fundamental to the success of this going forward. Now, I believe that we gotta crawl before you sprint, right? So I think the idea is we need to make sure that this works first. And I would suggest between these countries, I know we did one with Thailand, we're doing one with Malaysia, and we're trying to do one with the other ASEAN countries. But I think it's great if we can have early successes on this inter-country payment systems first, and then people will get a lot more comfortable, a lot more trustworthy of these systems. So I'm of the advocate of really collaborating. Not only, I mean, the central banks are really pushing on this, the association, the banks, but also the industry, to make sure that there is clear use case that's really beneficial first. So I would pick, for example, in Malaysia, Indonesia, maybe TKI first, right? And really zoom in on it, really make it successful, really get to the trenches instead of being too wide of a use case and only a small percentage of people using this. Then people will be like, oh, does it really help me? Is it really helpful? And all that kind of stuff. So I would pick, I don't know, pariwisata, for example, tourism, you know, Malaysians visiting here, Indonesians there, and TKI, and then from there you can roll it out, right? And I think with that, I believe success breeds success, right? So once that's successful, then you can use other use cases, you can push other use cases, instead of just being too general, oh yeah, now Indonesia and Malaysia, or Indonesia and Thailand can do it. Yeah, so what? What does that mean to me, right? So I think that focus is not yet there yet. So I would really encourage everyone to really focus on one use case, 2 or 3 that really would breed that success. Going back to the security question, I think there's always, you know, there's a saying that the bad guys talk with each other to figure out how to get through the good guys, and the good guys don't talk to each other because they're afraid that, you know, I don't want to share my secrets and everything. But the bad guys are like, you know, how do I penetrate these guys? So I think, how do we work together? You know, within the countries itself, it's hard. I'm not saying this is easy, right? But across the countries, it's even harder. How do we make sure that we really share the best practices, share the ideas, share the knowledge to make sure security continues getting better? Because the bad guys are out there and they're always getting better. And with AI, you know, because there's no subject without talking about AI, right? So everyone talks about AI. AI is a good thing, but there's all kinds of stuff from the fraud's perspective that people are like, bling, 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 this is really great for me to do some frauds through AI, right? So we gotta be really 2, 3, 5 steps ahead to really think about this, because AI is gonna be there for us for good, but it's gonna be really bad if we are not prepared for it as well.
Okay, Pak Tigor, but besides a forum like this, how do you make, what can you propose we do for industry players across nations to talk to each other, to discuss, to begin these discussions?
Yeah, I think, well, within Perbanas itself, I think we do a lot of sharing, but I think it's not just the banks, right? There's a lot of fintechs, there's a lot of other players. I think maybe with the ASEAN sort of association, we could sort of have a forum to make sure that security and cross-learning is actually much more pronounced. But I think it's all of the above, right? And I think not just a forum like this, but all of the above, really trying to share, really trying to cross-learn from each other.
Okay.
If I may just add to that, from the association's perspective also, just last year we launched the one MOU amongst the ASEAN countries as well. So definitely we can use that as a platform to share best practices amongst the fintech companies as well as the financial institutions as well. For example, SFA, we represent the fintech ecosystem that includes the financial institutions as well, and we can definitely be the bridge between the regulators across these countries as well as the industry as well. Because for us, we have a very strong experience in working with our regulator on a very regular roundtable approach as well on regulatory approaches. So we can definitely share the best practices and we can take that approach across the ASEAN region as well.
Okay. Pak Yebe, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think when we are talking about the payments and digital payments, and now we are talking about the risk on the cybersecurity. For sure, with digital itself, the threat is increasingly getting higher and higher. Yeah, but I think when we are talking about cybersecurity itself, although the risk is higher, digital is something that is traceable. Yeah, we know that there is digital footprint. So actually, other than the risk, the exposure is getting higher. Actually, if there is issues on the cybersecurity, it is more traceable right now, different with other maybe act of crimes on non-digital world. But now,
So,
when we
so
are
the
talking
bad
about,
guys are not actually getting smarter, do you think?
they are getting smarter, but actually digital footprint
It's
is
easier
everywhere.
to-
It's traceable. It's
Right,
whether we
right.
can really want to track them or not. Yeah. But so actually, when we are in charge of this payment system itself, then we have to make sure in the industry itself, everyone that has to go into this player in the digital payment itself has to undergo some security measures. Yeah, they have to comply with certain tests. The institution itself has to apply a good governance on security. Yeah, so we ensure that the payment system is safe for the users to use it, something like that. Yeah, so that's the role of the association to enforce the security standards has to be applied.
Do you also, like the association does also assume the role of educating the people as well in terms of
Yes, other
digital
than
literacy?
then rather than just the systems of the industry players to be strengthened, we also need to do a socializations to all the users. Yeah, the user itself, the one that is using the mobile payment, as well as the merchants. They are the in this our context, the Chris merchant or the QR merchants that use that kind of service, digital service. They need to be trained, socializations on the awareness of the security itself. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Pak Shadab, you mentioned earlier just a little bit, what are some of the key success factors that fintech companies have to do in order to navigate cross-border payments in the ASEAN market? Can you share a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be quick given the timer, but some of them are actually tied to the collaborative nature and the transparent approach to compliance. So essentially working closely with the regulators, to understand the compliance requirements and also making sure that you're taking the necessary steps right from the beginning. That has been one of the key success factors. The other is, of course, investments into robust and secure technologies. It could be, APIs, direct connectivity with the financial institutions as well. Then the other aspect is, of course, having maybe a regulatory sandbox to start with, so that you are able to understand the challenges, and then to have those industry pilots run as part of that. It's all about, ultimately making sure that the clear AML KYC guidelines have been defined and being adhered to as well. You have the processes in place. So these are some of the key success factors that I would say the fintech companies have had so far.
Okay. Last but not least, time is up. I don't know if I have just one for a closing remark from Paul to sum up our discussion. One key issue that has not been talked about is issues of reciprocity. Preserving state sovereign and also national interest, but also allowing for innovations to happen. What are your thoughts on this? How do we go about this? What do you propose we do in tackling these challenges that might exist in between nations as we go forward?
Well, it's actually a very tough question to really, but I think end of the day, I think sovereignty is key, right? And every country has its own sovereignty and national interests. So we must, look at that and recognize and be open to, kind of like adopt whichever and understand the sovereignty issue. Because we can't, how you say, kind of lessen or try to divert or try to reduce any of the sovereignty issues concerning that. What we could do is, in terms of understanding and see what is the flexibility that we can offer to each other and come with a solution towards this issue about sovereignty. A particular point is about data, right? Sharing of data. And we have actually also, as ASEAN Bankers Association, been working together in coming up with the ASEAN Interoperable Data Framework that would help in terms of seeing where are the benchmark, the minimum benchmark where we can collaborate and yet, able to share data across ASEAN, thinking about, the sovereignty issue of each of the data that we need to make sure that it's in the hands of the own country. That's what I will share with you there.
Okay, very well. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's all the time that we have for this session. This is only one discussion, only beginning, and we are hoping from this discussion, but we are hopeful that challenges are mere opportunities that need to be solved with innovations and collaborations that the world moving forward required for all of us to shift the way we traditionally do our business in order for us to grow together while making sure that no one is left behind. So we believe that digital economic transformation is key, is the way forward, and we hope that ASEAN can be a role model for the development of an integrated payment system that can be beneficial not only on a domestic and regional level, but also on a global level. So thank you, gentlemen, for your insights. A very interesting discussion. A big round of applause for our panelists. And with that, I will hand back to the MC. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kanya Sutisnawinata, for moderating this session. And before we continue, I would like to invite our moderator and also panelists to please take a place on stage to take a photo together for a photo session. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for our moderator and panelists for our first casual talk session. Please, to moderator and also all panelists, to please take a place on stage, and to our documentation team and also our fellow media to take a picture of the moderator and speakers of the first session. Allow me to count down. We'll be taking 2 photos again in 3, 2, 1. Once again, 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please give a round of applause and you may return to your seat. And next, ladies and gentlemen, please do still stay with us because we will be having another casual talk session. But before we do, as I mentioned before, we will now, of course, warm yourself up and probably test your knowledge and also your insight because we will be having our first Kahoot quiz of a day. But before I start, may I have another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? And I would like to invite each and every one of you to please join in our Kahoot quiz. For each and every one of you are eligible to join, either if you are here offline or also online. And before we start, I would like to explain some mechanism or rules on joining the Kahoot quiz. Please do join our Kahoot on your device by opening the following link, ladies and gentlemen, and enter the game pin, which we will provide shortly. Once again, please do log on to Kahoot and also enter the game pin. And for the username, please do use your name based on your identity card because this will come into place if you win the lucky prizes. And we'll be playing a total of 5 questions, and the faster you answer the question, the higher points you will get. So therefore, make sure you answer it quickly and also correctly, ladies and gentlemen. And the player with the highest score in total at the end, after 5 questions, will win the prize. And I'd like to also inform you, once I read the winner's announcement at the end of the Kahoot quiz, which will appear on the screen, please do raise your hand if you are here offline at the venue. But if you are joining us through our social media or digital platform, please do capture the moment on screen and then call the committee's number for prize collection purposes. As I can see here, we already have a number of participants joining in. Once again, I would like to invite everyone to please join us on Kahoot and also enter the game pin 9706689. And for the username, please do enter your name based on your identity card, ladies and gentlemen. As you prepare yourself, I would like to remind you there will be 5 questions for the first Kahoot quiz. Please do answer it correctly and also quickly, because the player who answers the question with the fastest speed will get the highest points, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we can see here more participants are joining in Kahoot. We'll give a little more time for those of you who are still logging on to Kahoot. And again, we will be having 2 Kahoot quiz for today, so please do stay with us until the end for both casual talk session, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be having interesting prizes which awaits for you, so therefore make sure to prepare yourself in answering all the questions. So are we ready? Is everyone ready? Okay, everyone here at the venue is ready, so let me ask for those of you joining us virtually or online, are the online participants ready, committee? Okay, it seems everyone is still joining us. And I would like to also remind you, for the username of the Kahoot game, please make sure you do enter your name based on your identity card. Because as I mentioned before, to redeem your prize, you will have to contact the committee's number, and then we have to confirm if it's actually or really you who won the Kahoot quiz, and we need to verify it by using your identity card, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are here offline, if your name appears, if you win the Kahoot quiz, please do raise your hand. But if you are joining us online, please do capture the screen with your name as the winner, and then also capture or write down the committee's phone number to contact them to redeem your prize. Because we have a number of prizes awaiting for you for this year's FEKDI 2023 Day 2 Kahoot quiz for the first casual talk session. So are we ready, ladies and gentlemen? Can I have a big round of applause if we are ready for the first Kahoot quiz? Can I have another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? All right, committee, it seems that we are ready to begin the first Kahoot quiz. Okay, we have Raffi, Meti, Mila, Rendita. Okay, we are still waiting here. Everyone else, it appears that we still have time to wait for more participants who are willing to join our Kahoot quiz. And I'd like to also remind you that we will be having another casual talk session right after this, so please do still stay with us. And ladies and gentlemen, if you feel that you would like to drink some tea or probably coffee or probably enjoy some refreshments, please do, because we have a food and beverage stall available at the corner of the Hall B Jakarta Convention Center. But I'd like to also invite you to please return to your seat once you have collected or picked up your refreshments and enjoy the snacks and also beverages from your seat. All right, as we can see here, we already have 277 participants logging into Kahoot, and the number is still increasing. Do not worry, ladies and gentlemen, you can join whether you are joining us online or either offline, because this is open for each and every one of you, for all participants joining in. Each and every one of you may join Kahoot, and we are ready to start the first quiz for the Casual Talk 1 Day 2 in 3, 2, 1. Prepare yourselves. One of the focus in forging cross-border economic interlinkage is to establish cross-border payments with such goals. Is it faster, cheaper, more transparent, secure, and inclusive? Or is it faster, cheaper, more transparent, secure, and exclusive? Or is it faster, cheaper, more transparent, complex, and inclusive? Or is it faster, cheaper, more transparent, complex, and exclusive? Take your choice. Be quick, be correct. And the answer is faster, cheaper, more transparent, secure, and inclusive. Let's see who managed to answer it correctly and quickly. CB won the highest points for answering correctly and also quickly. Okay, we will continue, ladies and gentlemen, with the second question for our Kahoot quiz. Remember, quickly and correctly. Several challenges and risks need to be considered in developing cross-border payment are as follow, except: is it differences in regulations between countries? Differences in business models and processes? Reciprocity concerns? Or is it relatively low investment costs? The time is ticking. We have 5 seconds left on the timer, ladies and gentlemen. Quickly and correctly. And the correct answer for the second question is relatively low investment costs. And now we will see the scoreboard. Desi Fitria UI has moved up the scoreboard with 1,924 points, followed by Arya, Ayue, Fikisani, and Benny. All right, we still have more questions coming up, so you still have the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to catch up. The development of cross-border payment requires collaboration among parties such as governments, central banks, industry players, or all are correct. Is the answer governments, or is it central banks, or is it industry players, or all are correct, ladies and gentlemen? Choose your answer, and the correct answer is all are correct. Once again, let's take a look at the scoreboard. Desi Fitria UI is still leading with 2,901 points, followed by Arya and Ayue. Okay, we'll continue to the third question of the day. Associations like ASPI, as representative of payment industry, has significant roles in forging cross-border payments, except is it actively involved in development, testing, pilot, and implementation stages? Or is it develop micro and technical policies? Or is it providing feedback and industry view to regulators? Or is it to decide pricing schemes? Once again, ladies and gentlemen, quickly and correctly to get the high points. And the answer is decide pricing schemes. Once again, let's take a look at the scoreboard. All right, Ray has now moved up onto the scoreboard, but Desi Fitria UI is still leading with 3,873 points. Next, we will continue. With which ASEAN country has crisp cross-border have been launched by Bank Indonesia in 2002? Is it Singapore? Is it Malaysia? Or is it Thailand? Or is it the Philippines? Once again, ladies and gentlemen, with which ASEAN country has crisp cross-border been launched by Bank Indonesia in 2022? Take your choice. Let's see the correct answer. And the correct answer is Thailand. And now let's see who has won the first Kahoot quiz. There we go. In third place, we have Ray. Second place, Fikisani. And first place goes to Desi Fitria UI. Can I have a big round of applause? Is Desi, Fiki, or Ray here today at the venue? Can I see a raise of hand? All right, I see. It seems as if all of our winners are joining us through digital platforms. So make sure once again to please take a screenshot of this winner podium and also the committee's contact. Make sure you contact to redeem your prizes. Once again, congratulations to all of our winners. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue to our next agenda. And if you have not yet won our Kahoot quiz, do not worry, because we will be having another Kahoot quiz session right after our second casual talk. So please do make sure you stay with us until the end, because we still have more prizes awaiting for you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to continue to our next agenda for today, for our second casual talk. In this session, ladies and gentlemen, we will be discussing ways to capture opportunities from payment connectivity between countries, especially ASEAN countries, and also its upcoming challenges. In our second casual talk with the theme, Cross-Border Economic Interlinkages, Risks and Opportunities. With 4 panelists who will share their experiences of integrating an economy from the payment aspects to trade in goods and services. And this session will be moderated by the Managing Partner, Strategy and Transactions, EY Indonesia, ASEAN Leader, Transactions and Corporate Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome onto the stage our moderator, Mr. David Rimbo.
Terima kasih Mbak Sarah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be all upon us. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Om, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. A very good morning to all of you, distinguished guests, delegates, participants, ladies and gentlemen who might be actually joining, not in this room, but basically on the online streaming platform. A very warm welcome to the second sessions of the Casual Talk in conjunction with FEKDI's conference. Now, as mentioned, my name is David Rimbo. I'll be moderating this session this morning. It's my absolute privilege and honor to be here, addressing basically a group of people who really knows payment system, who are really entrenched and involved and participating in the implementation of payment system, not only in Indonesia, but also throughout Southeast Asia. So a warm welcome. Now, in our session this morning, we've gone through basically the first session whereby there had been nuggets and advices and sharing of viewpoints, more on the conceptual level, more on the framework level, more on the regulatory level. Now, this session aims to build upon that. We want to hear from those players who are key stakeholders, real ecosystem players in payment system, in advancing the interconnectivity of payment system across basically countries in Southeast Asia and beyond. So we'll be learning from them in terms of understanding what are the challenges, what are the pain points, what are the lessons learned, what are the new emerging technologies coming in, how to basically embrace them, how to educate the consumer base for early adoptions and for effective basically utilization of the various emerging basically platforms and application. So this session is titled Cross-Border Economic Interlinkage, Risks and Opportunities. And in this session, we will talk about industry players' roles and initiative in forging cross-border economic linkages. We're going to hear about potential risks and opportunities of those cross-border economic linkages. We're going to hear about market experiences. We wanted to know and understand what have been the best practices that can be basically be absorbed and also be replicated in the various countries. And we want to basically establish as well a baseline in terms of understanding what are the opportunities that emerge in terms of enhancing collaboration between the stakeholders. So ladies and gentlemen, we are honored that we are going to have 4 very experienced, very distinguished panelists this morning representing the view of the industry players. They'll be joining me, and accordingly I would like to invite first amongst the 4 panelists, the Managing Director for Payments, Rewards and Group Strategy of GrabFin, Mr. Ben Liu. Hello, Pak. Good morning. Welcome. Next to join us on the stage, I would like to invite CEO and co-founder of Dana Indonesia, Bapak Vince Iswara. Good morning, Pak. Welcome. A warm welcome. Next, joining us on the stage, I would like to invite the Managing Director of GoPay, Bapak Budi Ganda Subrata. Good morning and welcome back. And last but not least, to join us on the stage, I would like to invite Executive Vice President of Digital Bank Development and Operation of Bank BRI, Bapak Kaspar Situmorang. Welcome, Pak Kaspar. A warm welcome once again, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this morning. I think the audience are very expectant of being able to really, enjoy from you all of the nuggets and really basically the low-hanging fruits that you can basically distill for us this morning in terms of aligning what you have gone through. Because either way, depending on which way we look at it, you guys have been disruptors. There had been basically those earlier years or days whereby it had been so difficult in terms of mapping through basically the regulatory frameworks. Things are very rigid, things are very regulated, but on one side, there has been an absence as well of regulatory frameworks, of conceptual basically definitions of the stuffs, the technology, the disruptions that you guys are going to implement. You guys have successfully gone through that. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I myself are very excited about it. We wanted to hear as much as possible, pick your brains, get to understand more from basically your experience. So if I may, to start with Pak Ben. Pak Ben, once again, this is driven by the reality that Grab is a very established, well-received, well-adopted super app already around the region. So you guys have gone through basically implementing not only just basically platforms in Singapore initially, but this has basically been implemented more widely in Southeast Asia markets. So the question to you is, would you share your thoughts on the current effort on the cross-border integrated digital payment ecosystem in ASEAN, once again, guided by your experience in terms of, leading basically Grab Financial, GrabFin, expanding in the various markets?
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's a privilege. I'll do more than just share my thoughts on it. I'll tell you what I feel about the efforts that have been undertaken. I mean, so being a resident or a citizen from ASEAN, to actually see these central banks and the industry come together to take initiative, to take leadership, to commit and to execute, to connect our regional payment systems. I think it's something great, right? And it's not just these bilateral arrangements that they were doing, but these investments to actually come out with innovative solutions where, these multilateral solutions, Project Nexus, etc. I think that's commendable, right? So I feel proud. I feel proud about that. And congratulations to the team who has been working on the QR connectivity between Malaysia and Indonesia. Job well done, excellent. And then the other thing I would share is, in terms of how I feel about it, is I feel really excited. I feel excited about what the industry is about to usher in over the next couple of years. I'm really glad to not have to hear about these painful situations where migrant workers have to spend upwards of 6% of their payments, just to transfer money to their loved ones. We don't have to hear that again. I mean, that's something I look forward to. I also look forward to, because of these cross-border linkages, to hear about craftsmen, people who come up with products and services in their respective countries now being able to share their passions, bring their wares beyond their domestic markets into the international stage. So very excited about that. And frankly, I could keep going on the economic benefits of this regional payments connectivity, how it brings our economies closer together, how it will bring us as a people tighter together. But maybe I'll stop there to just say I'm really enthusiastic about what's been happening. I think the industry's headed in the right direction. And I second BI's call to the rest of the member countries of ASEAN to join up and just have this regional connectivity across the region. I'll talk about maybe challenges that we face later. But yeah, these are my thoughts.
Thank you, Pak Ben. If I may basically go through Pak Vince now, maybe in terms of distilling this at the more local level, Pak, within the Indonesian marketplace, what has been your view in terms of the current condition as well as the potential future of digital payment integration, digital payment adoption going forward, as well as what do you think has been the remaining basically challenges to be further addressed in Indonesia in terms of further improving payment interconnectivity?
Thank you, Pak Rimbo. First of all, I want to thank Bu Maya, Pak Diki, Bu Filia, for having me here. Distinguished panelists, it's fun to be having you here. Some of you are already old dear friends of mine, and distinguished guests. I think this is a very exciting moment in our point of time because we're having so much innovations and we're having so much collaborations between the industries, the regulators, and the governments. And the way that I see that what we've been facing in the last few years, especially in regards to integration, interoperability, it's just amazing potential that come out of it. Our distinguished guests, Pak Yebe, and previous guest was talking about initially Pak Tigor. Initially at the beginning, a lot of us are very reluctant because we are scared what's going to happen to our business, for example, advantage, right? Because a lot of us essentially at the very all beginnings are acquiring merchants on our own, what we call it ecosystem. But then what we see happening ever since this integration and interoperability happening is that the consumers are beginning to adopt it faster and faster. Because the number one hurdle for any kind of adoptions is the universal acceptance. Right? So when consumers started to realize that we can start using our app regardless of which app you use or which issuers you use, you can start using it to anywhere and everywhere, then the adoption start to pick up very fast. And then now we see more and more of the users, not only just more users are using it, but they are using it more frequently. And that's at domestic level. So us, as a company, as a practitioner in the market, essentially when we are at the beginning, a lot of our efforts are being done to actually acquire the merchants, right? To integrate with the merchants, to acquire them, or to integrate with the banks, and one by one, it takes so long. With this new standard, with the KRIS in Indonesia, immediately we solve that. So now everyone can share to each other. So negotiation to merchants becomes so much easier because it's standardized, it's regulated. And we really the technicalities and everything, it's already also become part of the standard. So our pace is becoming so much faster. So what we do, instead of innovating how to integrate faster, instead now how we can provide better service. And that's at the domestic level. So coming up with this cross-border initiative, we can also start to see the potential. So what we've seen in the domestic previously, that the users now are starting to become much more active, growing faster domestically. With this cross-border interoperability, we can start to see the potential as well. Excuse me. It does take time for the education to come true. I think that's the issue here. The only what we call the hurdle for the long term is that the education still need to take time, because essentially at the beginning, for example, like even though the KRIS, the Indonesian standard, is already can be interoperable, people still asking, hey, can I use this app to pay for you? And the cashier would say, no, you cannot. You have to use the other app. But now over time, people already start to understand, and they will say, can you use KRIS? Yes, we can, and I can use anything. That will be the same challenge that we're going to face in the cross-border as well, because for example, if I go to Thailand right now, I can use all our app here, immediately there, but then the merchant said, no, you can't. Eventually, over time, I think the education will be more and more prevalent, and then once that happens, and then people are using. So I guess that's my cue.
Thank you, Pak Vince. I think this is a real player in the sector, because he kept on basically stressing is KRIS. I still remember watching in the TV Pak Perry explaining it is not QRIS, it is not QRIS, it's KRIS. So this is a proof of a real player in the ecosystem that he's pronouncing it correctly. Thank you, Pak Vince. KRIS. Okay, let me move on to Pak Budi, if I may. Pak Budi, once again, we have drawn on Dana's basically experience in terms of the build-up. I think GoPay has a lot to say about GoPay's own experiences, going through basically the initial build-up process and eventually becoming so successful. So the question is also similar. What have been the challenges? What do you think are still the remaining opportunities that is yet untapped by GoPay? And we really wanted to get the most nuggets out of you, Pak.
Thanks. So commenting on Vince's correct pronunciation on Keris, I had the pleasure of being on the same panel with Ibu Fili, and then I mistakenly said Curis instead of Keris, and then she immediately looked at me, so I had to correct myself. So yes, it's Keris. I think the challenges that we had is basically the same with what Pak Tigor said earlier. Right? I think there was a lot of reluctance between us. I think in a way we were afraid, right? We were afraid that our quote-unquote cake would be eaten because we were so enjoying the closed-loop ecosystem that each of us were probably enjoying at the time. But then I think Bank Indonesia back then had a much more progressive idea that, hey, it should be open, right? And then we realized it because after Keris was implemented, then the number of users started growing, the number of merchants started growing, and you can really see the benefit of the users. Today, it doesn't matter if you want to use Grab app, Dana app, GoPay app, or Brimo app, for example. You can use that same app to pay to whichever merchant. So I think that openness and that interoperability will be key, right? And that is also a success factor in how we want to push cross-border payments eventually. So the challenge initially was more on changing the mindset, but then we soon realized that, hey, our loyalty is actually to the problem statement and the user. That's a mantra that we always use in GoPay, right? Our loyalty is to the problem statement and the user. The problem statement is how do we provide a payment ecosystem that is open, accessible, cheap, safe, not only in the context of interoperable domestic payment, but also eventually, hopefully after Project Nexus, how to provide the same principle for cross-border payments. I think Ben also mentioned that there are problems today, especially for diaspora in, be it Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesian workers, or any other workers from ASEAN. It is accessible because there are many remittances company, but it's not cheap, right? You literally have to pay a high percentage rate just to transfer money. And on top of that, it's not really real time. So if you have an emergency fund that you need to transfer, the question is, one, is it cheap? Not really. Is it accessible? Probably. Is it real time? Not really. Is it safe? You don't know, right? So there's a real problem there, which I think all of us want to solve. And I think the key is how can we collaborate each other, not only within the private sector, but also between private and public sector. So the key is also, one of the challenges is also not only for us, but also for regulators, how do you create a regulatory framework that is nurturing, but at the same time, you also push for innovation and growth as well. So again, the challenge has always been regulation is out. Is it really restricting for innovation? But how do we also push more collaboration and interoperability between the players?
Thank you, Pak Budi. Before moving on to Pak Kaspar, since the two of you actually slightly touch upon it, how about education, Pak? Because if you look at it, the interconnectivity is going to be there up to a particular level that it is going to be ideal and perfect eventually. But in terms of making it adoptable, making it really being used as widely as possible by not only just the Indonesian consumers base, but also the consumers base which come with different, I would say, social, educational background, etc., etc. What will the stakeholders, the ecosystem players do in terms of educating this? I am, while you were talking it, I just remember, I landed in Bandara Soekarno-Hatta last night, and I was slightly, complaining because there was a long queue, clearing custom, right, checking. And then the porter basically said, "Pa, you should be grateful because few weeks ago the queue was about 2 kilometers long or 3 kilometers long." I said, "Why?" Because at that point in time, Bea Cukai insisted on every single returnees to Indonesia to basically to lodge everything based upon the electronic basically login, right? And then they had significant problem in terms of educating the returning pilgrims from Umroh, from Haji, etc., to fill up all of those. And they also found out it's not only about educating them to make use of the system, but them lacking basically also internet connectivity, Wi-Fi connectivity during the travel had also prevented them in terms of making use of this so-called seamless system. So applying the same basically logic, Pak, at that level, we are talking about branching out from the urban, more established, urban area with infrastructure, digital infrastructures, etc., more to the rural area. How do we ensure and educate that the consumer segments are, from a financial inclusiveness point of view, are all well taken care of, Pak? Tough question, eh?
I'll go first. I think you mentioned it already, right? I think us living in Jakarta, we are blessed today with banking infrastructure, payments infrastructure, high-speed connectivity. So I like to think that Jakarta is a bubble, whereas most of Indonesians, again, in the context of local, not only in ASEAN, right? And I'm sure other countries, probably not Singapore, but other countries like Philippines or Thailand is going to be the same. The urban areas are more like a bubble where you have much more advanced infrastructure. So in order to, quote unquote, migrate people from a cash-based payments to a cashless or a digital solution is relatively easier. So when you talk about education, right, it's not only about the form of payment, but you also need to tell them what's the benefit. But also benefit is different between me in Jakarta, the benefit for me as a person living in Jakarta, or also for someone, it's different for someone that is living, let's say, in somewhere in the outskirts of Sulawesi or a remote area in Indonesia. And I'll give you a story, and this is actually happening in Jakarta, right? When we want to offer KRIS for merchants, the benefit that we were offering to merchants is that, hey, you can, it's basically a super QR. So that's how we frame it. It's a super QR that today you can start accepting Grab OVO, Dana, Brimo, BCA, GoPay, essentially every single e-money and bank and fast payments out there. But that benefit is not alone because there's also a mindset challenge. So one of the warungs that I spoke to, and I tried selling GoPay. I tried giving her T-shirts and free memorabilia, right, just as a sweetener so that she can be onboarded as a GoPay merchant. I spent about half an hour trying to convince her to be a GoPay merchant, where I said to her, hey, you'll get a real-time payment. We'll give you 0% MDR because Bank Indonesia back then had an initiative to push the MDR to 0 for micro merchants. And then after half an hour, she was convinced. But then the lady next to her, the next warung, immediately said to her like this, don't go with GoPay, because if you go with GoPay, your transaction will be transparent. You will be taxed by Dirjen Pajak. Failed immediately. That lady immediately said, look, I canceled. I don't want to be a merchant. I'd rather accept cash. So how do we change that mindset, right? Because at the same time, there's this whole benefit of being onboarded, go into the digital platform. It's much more financially included. You can get access to loans, working capital loans, financing, etc. But there's also mindset of, hey, if I use digital payments, everything will be much more open and I will be taxed. And we tend to forget that more than, I don't know, depending on which statistic you read, right? I think 90% of Indonesia's economy is driven by the informal sector. So that level of training and education, I think that's something that we need to convey. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know the answer, but those are the different challenges that we're facing today, especially in terms of really educating and really trying to train and more literacy in financial product, especially on the digital sector.
Okay, I'll answer it quickly because I need, Kaspar to have a long speech as well. But it's not an easy way, right? It's not something simple, straightforward. I mean, you have to go through the cycle. It was the first adopter, and then after that, the second adopter, and then you go through maturity and everything. So it goes all the same. But every one of us, I think a lot of us are here are been in the startup industry. That's what we do best, how to grow our user base. So there's a lot of channels, there's a lot of ways, you can go to your digital, social media, you can do to activation, everything. But come on, all of us have users that's been using our app. And that's something that we actually push the education through our own app specifically. And then that works pretty effectively in many, many ways, right? So that's one. Two, we always believe that if the app is good enough or the experience is good enough, as long as you can convince the earlier adopter, eventually there will be word of mouth to expand that effectively. So what we've been doing, for example, in certain areas, we actually went to Natuna, which is the left uppermost island of Indonesia, where there is only, 3,000 people there. And then we onboarded like few 10 or 20 people, and then eventually now almost all the merchants in Natuna now is already using Chris. And then that goes also the same with any other area. So through our experience, it's just not a simple one way. You have to keep educating, you have to have initiative, you actually have to go there and educate. And then I believe that will go the same with the cross-border. It's not going to be immediate, but you need to show, you need to give an example, and as long as it's a strong value proposition, and as long there's some early adopters that using it, eventually it will roll out and it will just become, like flowing down to a greater acceptance.
Thank you, Pak Vince, Pak Budi. I think let me move on to Pak Kaspar. In fact, BRI as one of the most successful, in fact, the most successful bank in terms of penetrating and in a way dominating the MSMEs basically segments. I think what Pak Budi and Pak Vince have just elaborated might actually resonate with your experience as well, Pak. But I'm going to ask you a different question, Pak. This is more geared towards your position representing a bank, the traditional player which got disrupted in the last few years because of the presence of all of these new fintech players, etc. and sort of thing. Now, the question is very simple, Pak. In terms of challenges, in your opinion, what challenges will the providers of digital payment, especially banks, face today and in the future in the context of all of these evolving technologies with greater basically so-called incursion by newer players with newer technologies into the transaction payments field?
Right, thank you, David. First of all, thanks Pak Diki and Maya for the invitations for BRI to be here. So just to give a bravo as well to Bank Indonesia, we are also one of the early adopters of BI Fast, Snap, and also Chris, all right? I pronounce it better, right, than Vincent, right? So we as one of the oldest banks in Indonesia, we also figured out that there are plenty of underbanked and unbanked in Indonesia. So based on that, what Pak Tigor earlier mentioned, that some of those infrastructures in the rural areas, for example, more than 70,000 of rural areas in Indonesia, we dig deep. We learn from the tech company or the startup company how to become customer obsessed. So we did a massive amount of research. So we figured out that some of those customers over there, not so fancy with self-service through mobile apps and all the apps that we had at the time. So we go through a series of research that we launched by the name of Agent Banking. So our flagship of Agent Banking is Agent BRI Link, because we want to accelerate also the CRIS penetrations of BI across all of the rural areas, across 70,000 of villages across Indonesia. So last quarter, we have about 650,000 of Agent Banking, Agent BRI Link across Indonesia, with just in quarter one, 325 trillions of rupiah volume of money perpetrated over there. What I'm trying to say is there are plenty of users also over there that would like to get access to the financial inclusions. However, they still lack of financial literacy. So with that we provide, as a BRI, we provide alternative for those kind of customers through the networks of Agent BRI links. And by doing that, of course, we try to accelerate also the implementations of CRIS and also getting them to the financial systems ASAP as well. So the good thing is, because when we talk about cross-border payment later on, a lot of customers from foreign countries, Malaysia, Thailand, comes to their villages for rural areas of Indonesia. All those payment systems are already available over there through the networks of our Agent Banking, Agent BRI Link. So that is one thing that we could help to accelerate these potential challenges here of financial inclusion in Indonesia. So back to you.
Thank you, Pak Kaspar. Let me get back to Pak Ben again. Once again, we wanted to, in a way, steal as much as possible from your experience, from Grab's experience, in terms of being a dominant super app in the region. Want to learn, Pak, in terms of us avoiding some of the pain points and challenges that you've gone through, the lesson learned that you've gone through, building basically a model that works basically across markets. What can you say about business models, about regulatory framework condition, as well as market behaviors or market structures, which will be supportive for a widely accepted cross-border interconnectivity in payment system.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but maybe I can talk a little bit more about the practical challenges for merchants, right, that we face. Now, it's really the problems that you have to face are really back to basic things. And so, I mean, this is a payment system that we're talking about. And so reliability of the system is absolutely critical, right? It's got to consistently work. It's got to happen really quickly. And now it's going to happen cross-border. So that's an added leg, right? For the merchant and the consumer, you both talked about consumers, it has to be as good as the next best alternative. And for an offline merchant, the next best alternative is cash. And actually cash is not an easy thing to fight. It's worked for centuries. And so it's not a trivial thing, right? So these payments, they cannot fail. They certainly shouldn't be failing for, say, a restaurant at lunchtime, peak hour, for one that's located in a tourist destination. That would just be absolutely horrific for them. So basically the reliability of the system, the service they're providing, absolutely critical. Budi mentioned about being in a bubble and perhaps talking about where in the outer cities there are problems. There are actually problems that still exist in well-penetrated, well-infrastructured markets. So I'll tell you a real story. In Singapore, I go to my nearby supermarket. They've built a really well-designed scan-to-order, payments integrated system. I go there. I do my shopping, scan on the go, really cool. And when I try to check out, I can't. And the question, why is that the case? It's the supermarket was in the mall, underground, no connectivity. So I mean, that's a real practical challenge. Everybody has handsets there. Connectivity is generally good, but you find these pockets still where you have these challenges. So, I mean, there's just reliability of the service. I think that's one. I think you talked about education earlier. The truth is, when we hit the ground, we do learn that there are a lot of MSMEs who are not so familiar with technology or payments. In fact, we go so far to say some of them are just downright afraid to make this change. So the solutions that we've got to create, I mean, a lot of our designers and our product guys are spending a lot of time trying to keep things really simple. Because if you leave things complicated, and this is true story, you will leave out the Bali furniture manufacturer, right, who makes wonderful pieces, has customers going to his website, but the website's a static website. Doesn't know how to get on a gateway, accept payments. And that's a missed opportunity for these guys and for archetypes of such merchants out there. And I believe this infrastructure not only has to be built, it has to be brought to them to understanding sort of their constraints and their situations. And frankly, it's not just about accepting payments, because there are added downstream activities that they need to be familiar with. So, how do you take the order and reconcile it with the payments before I actually fulfill the order? Things like that, I mean, these matter. And, maybe I'll just talk lastly about a practical challenge of, you talked about word of mouth, and that certainly helps with consumers. The consumers can help each other. I think from the perspective of the merchants, we might be able to sign them up with, very compelling propositions, etc. But or even gifts to get them to sign them up. But we've learned on the ground too is actually in the beginning stage, there's a lot of hand holding that needs to happen. You can't just sell them the tech. We've basically got to go on the ground, help to train, upskill the owner, the merchant, the staff on how to adopt, literally integrate it into their existing system, existing process and their workflows. Because if you don't do that, they're just going to revert back to cash. And so it takes time, it takes persistence. You just got to keep going. And only once it's in their day-to-day flow, that's when you can start to let go. And that's when we have change. So I think these are, again, back to basics, right? Like just keep it simple, recognize that, there are people with fears when it comes to technology and change. And it's not just selling. We've got to actually handhold them with the actual transition.
Thank you, Pak Ben. Pak Vince, let me get to you. We've so far distilled things into a very operational and very granular and very technical in terms of the discussion points as raised. Let me bring it one notch up. This concept of interconnectivity, this concept about cross-border so-called reach, of the payment system, is it something that is at one point in time critical, but also an important building block for a more interconnected market? So the idea is to understand from you whether interconnectivity and interoperability of payment system is sufficient to fulfill this grand scheme of things. We want to have a market that is more connected. We want to have our MSMEs and our business basically players being able to cut across geographical borders, etc. Do we start from here, or do we need some other things to be put in place as well?
Absolutely. So in my point of view, right, this is a very critical initiative in order to open up this opportunity. I mean, I compare it because I just came back from Europe. So I compare it to EU, for example, right? So the thing about EU is in order for them to, what they wanted, their vision for them to, open up the economy in the European is they now have one currency. This is called euro. But then with one currency, there's a lot of issues that associated with, forcing some countries to actually adopt the currency. National interests, cultural contacts, regulatory contacts. There's just a lot of things. So with this interoperability, interconnectivity, what happened is we want to kind of achieve the same thing, that is opening up this economy in this region, which is 600 million populations, right? One meaning was actually is even bigger than Europe. And now we can have this cross-border transaction, seamless, very transparent, adopting technology that is standardized, adopting commercial that the government actually negotiated on our behalf, which is thank you so much. And automatically is now what we need to do is education to the users, to the merchants, to tap into this opportunity. The more this happening, the faster we adopt this. I truly believe that this is actually going to open up the potential for the ASEAN market. And I just ask, we as not only as an issuer, as an acquirer, have started to see more and more of our merchants actually being transacted with people in Thailand already. Our users already transacting in Thailand. And this happens without us having to go through all of this, compliance in regulation in Thailand, acquiring the merchants in Thailand directly, negotiating the commercials, handling a lot of the operations. We can now do it automatically because of this initiative. And then now let's see the potential down 2 or 3 years. We now know the people are very nomadic. people can work anywhere in all the countries. People can go to Bali. The Thai people can go to Bali. The Indonesian can work in Phuket, and it's everywhere in the world. And the income that they're getting can be get from all the countries. The SMEs can sell all across the regions. So the way I see it is similar to what EU trying to do without the complications that they're facing. So this is going to be such a game-changing, and I do believe this is a critical on a high level and also on a practical level.
Thank you, Pak Vince. Pak Budi, if I may, just continuing on that particular discussion. I think we have this priceless opportunity of being able to get the ears of the regulators here this morning. So from GoPay's and from your point of view, once again, in terms of actualizing, implementing this cross-border, integrated, interconnected, digital, payment system, ecosystem, what can you perhaps advise, or what can you, or perhaps aja curhat, if there's any outstanding, basically, viewpoints that, perhaps is worth discussing, since we have actually the ears of the regulators in front of us this morning. Silakan, Pak.
I need to craft my words correctly and carefully here. Not really advising the regulators. I think from a practical perspective. So I think what we are seeing today, the way the regulation is being written, being developed, right? I think it's clear that there's a clear wish and objective to push for economic growth. You can see it not only from a monetary perspective or a monetary regulator like the central bank, Bank Indonesia in this case, but also other ministries like trade agreements, right? So you really want to push in terms of driving GDP and output, you want to drive net exports as well. From net exports, hence the importance of cross-border payments becomes paramount. And I think to a certain extent, I think the fact that the central banks, the top ASEAN central banks have been talking to each other, Project Nexus from Bank International Settlements, it's already a clear indication that we are really pushing for cross-border payments. So the framework is there. I think the question is, how do we operationalize it? And I think when you operationalize it, that's where all the challenges starting to pop up, right? Issues such as dispute resolution, issues such as consumer protection, issues such as with more accessibility and more cross-border and more grassroots accessibility, there will be more issues such as money laundering and terrorism financing. So how do we construct a robust AML-CFT framework, not only in the context of domestic payments, but also cross-border payments? And this becomes critical because part of AML-CFT framework is customer due diligence, KYC. And we also have issues such as Privacy Data Act and also privacy data sovereignty. Some regulators may not allow PII information to be transferred outside of their countries, but there's a clear need of having these information to mitigate AML-CFT risk. So I think, I wouldn't say an advice, but I think it's an advice for all of us, right? I think clearly public-private partnership is critical. There needs to be more conversation, especially on the practical side of things, because regulation is written, there's a clear foundation and guidelines so that we can roll out the implementation. But once it is being operationalized, that's where the challenges starting to pop up. And we need to keep an eye and ears open and to react quickly and swiftly to address some of these potential existing risks later on.
Thank you, Pak Budi. Very well taken. Pak Kaspar, if I may move on to the last question, Pak, to you. This is built upon BRI's very unique, basically, strong, basically, point in terms of serving the MSMEs, Pak. In terms of financial inclusion, Pak, can we understand a bit further what has been BRI's strategy, Pak, in terms of really leveraging some BRI's unique, strong position to further basically improve financial inclusion through the introduction of the various new basically technologies and platforms and services, Pak.
Right, thank you, Pak. So basically, BRI serve lots of millions of MSMEs across Indonesia, right? So as the agents of development in Indonesia, we always committed to advance MSMEs to go export enter international market and go international. So we have an event, a flagship every year by the name of Brilliantpreneurs MSMEs Export. So last year, 2022, we helped as being a matchmakers for all of those MSMEs. We closed the books about 1.2 trillion rupiah last year and invite some of those suppliers, buyers coming from 20 countries across the world last year. And this is one of our commitment to not only accelerate the financial inclusions, but also provide some sort of a financial literacy also by doing this match makers for those MSMEs. And last but not least, I think we always encourage those MSMEs to do cross-border trade, cross-border payments, because not only accelerate our financial growth, but also economic inclusions proportionally, I think, every year. Back to you.
Thank you, Pak Gaspar. We are absolutely on the dot with regards to time. Thank you, for your sharing this morning. Have been very enjoyable, and delightful hearing all those insights. I think at the end of the day, if I may distill what you have shared, this morning, there are four perhaps area of concerns and four key basically considerations in terms of further building up basically and preparing basically the markets and the regulation frameworks and the ecosystem players in terms of embracing a more interconnected payment system in the world. I think point number one that needs to be basically highlighted is the operating system and technology. So there has to be alignment, there has to be further consolidation, there has to be further structural so-called agreement in terms of aligning and a consistent, reliable system. Second is infrastructures. You mentioned about basically some of the technical challenges as faced when you roll out, which are entirely guided by infrastructures, basically conditions. Third is, in fact, adoption and the users' applications. Many of you mentioned about bubbles in the urban areas and basically the financial inclusion, basically power of the systems, not yet basically reaching basically the mass basically populace. So that is also an area that needs to be further resolved, especially with education and the upgrading and upskilling. And lastly, I think especially Pak Ben mentioned about reliability and security. Pak Budi mentioned about cross-border data protection, etc. This sort of thing. All of those will also need to be addressed in terms of ensuring that we are in the process of building a very interconnected payment system to serve basically the regional markets in the region in Southeast Asia. So with that, allow me to close this particular session, ladies and gentlemen. It has been my delight, my honor to serve as the moderator. And once again, let's put our hands together for our panel speakers. I hand over to Mbak Sarah.
Thank you very much, Mr. David Rimbo. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, can I have a big round of applause? And to our moderator and also panelists, please remain on stage and please take your place on stage. For next, we'll be having a photo session of the moderator and also speaker of our second casual talk for the second day of Festival Ekonomi Keuangan Digital Indonesia 2023. Once again, I would like to invite to our documentation team and also our fellow media to please take a picture of our moderator and also panelists for our second casual talk session. And I will do the countdown for 2 photos in 3, 2, 1. Once again, in 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, gentlemen. You may now return to your seats. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, can you have a big round of applause? Thank you very much, Mr. David Rimbo, and also to all of our speakers for a very fruitful, insightful, and of course, enriching discussion for our casual talk of the day. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are still very enthusiastic to stay with us for our next agenda because it appears we still have more prizes for you to win. But before I continue with our second Kahoot quiz, is everyone ready to win more prizes? Can I hear a round of applause if you are ready for more prizes, ladies and gentlemen? And yes, we have more more prizes where we will be sharing with you through another Kahoot quiz based on our second casual talk. But I would like to also remind you and also once again congratulate our winners from our first Kahoot quiz. And it appears that we have 5 winners. Here they are. Before, we have only seen 3 names, but here we have Desi Fitria, Vicky Sani, Ray, Benny, and Meti. And is Benny and Meti here at the Jakarta Convention Center? Can I see a raise of hand? Is Benny or Meti here? All right, it appears Benny and Meti is also joining us online. Therefore, to all the winners, please do capture the screen and also write down our committee's contact to redeem your prize. So congratulations once again. Can I have a big round of applause for our winners for our first Kahoot quiz? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our second Kahoot quiz. The mechanism and also the rules of the play is still the same. Please do join us on the Kahoot link and also enter the game pin to join in our quiz. And each and every one of you is eligible to join. You may join this quiz and also win the prize. We have more prizes to be won. To be exact, we have 5 more prizes for 5 winners of the Kahoot quiz, ladies and gentlemen. And for the username of the Kahoot quiz, please do use your name based on your identity card, for this will be used to redeem your gift or your prize if you do win our second Kahoot quiz. And once again, we'd like to also inform you, for the Kahoot quiz itself, you have to be able to answer the question correctly, but also quickly as well to redeem the highest points. And after 5 questions, we will see who is the winner with the highest points, who will be able to win the prizes. So without further ado, let's open and start the screen of our second Kahoot quiz of the day. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please prepare yourself. Please join the Kahoot link with the game pin as stated below at 337-1222. Once again, please join us on our Kahoot link, ladies and gentlemen, with the game pin 337-1222. It appears we already have a number of participants joining in. We still have time, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to invite you all to please join in because everyone may join the Kahoot and also try your luck in winning the prizes. All right, we already have 132, 133, and it's still adding up for the participants of this quiz. I'd like to also remind you that once you have answered the question, make sure that your name is correct and also based on your identity card. And for those of you who is lucky enough to be the winner at the end, make sure to be able to print the screen if you are joining us online. But for those of you who are joining us offline here at the Jakarta Convention Center, please do raise your hand and our committee will be more than happy to assist you to help you redeem your prize. All right, let's see here. For the participant count is, okay, we have almost reached 200 participants, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, 193, and the numbers are still going up. Once again, we still have time. Let's join in our second Kahoot quiz with the game pin 337-1222. And this Kahoot quiz, of course, will be based on our second casual talk of the day. And we assure you that the questions may be easier. Okay, we'll ready to start. Kahoot quiz casual talk 2, day 2, FEKDI 2023. In 3, 2, 1, get ready with your devices. The first question is, the following can be a challenge to the cross-border payments market except, is it high costs? Is it low speed? Is it limited access? Or is it sufficient transparency? We still have 10 seconds on the clock. Choose which one is the correct one and choose it quickly to get the highest points. Let's see. The correct answer for the first question is sufficient transparency. And now let's take a look at the scoreboard, ladies and gentlemen. The highest score goes to Nadira P with 959, followed by Arika and Bayu. All right. We'll continue with our second question. Cross-border payments in the current seamless and borderless economy becomes blank to anyone while maintaining their security. Is it slower or is it accessible Is it more expensive or is it less transparent? All right, ladies and gentlemen, make sure to choose the correct answer. And the time is 3 seconds left before we see the correct answer. And the correct answer is accessible. Once again, we will take you to see the scoreboard. Ooh, we have new winners moving up the scoreboard with Arika Unpad leading, followed by Ikrar and Nadira P. Don't worry, we still have the opportunity to move up on the scoreboard as well. The next question is, which is the correct statement regarding the meaning of financial inclusion? Is it availability of access to financial service products? Is it knowledge of managing finances? Is it skill in managing finances? Or is it knowledge of using financial service products? 3 seconds left. And the correct answer is, let's take a look, the availability of access to financial service products. And once again, let's take a look at the numbers here. And Ikrar DPSP still is leading with 2,895 points, followed by Nadira and Kopi Digital moving up the scoreboard as well. All right, let's see. Next, what is the name of the central bank digital currency, or CBDC, that is currently being developed in Indonesia? Is it Digital Garuda? Or is it Digital Rupiah? Is it Rupiah Wallet? Or is it Garuda Wallet? Take your choice, ladies and gentlemen. And now we will unveil the correct answer. It's Digital Rupiah. Now let's take a look on the scoreboard. Arika Unpad has moved up again with 3,821 points, followed by Nadira and Bayu Febrian. And next, one of the 5 interlinkages modalities signed by ASEAN's 5 of the Regional Payment Connectivity, or RPC MOU below is it Application Programming Interface, or API? Real-Time Gross Surcharge, or RTGS? Is it Data Science? Or is it Front Payment System, or FPS? 3 seconds left. You still have the opportunity to move up the scoreboard and also win. And the correct answer is Application Programming Interface, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's take a look for the podium or the winners. We'll see the top 3 first. In 3rd place is Nadira P. 2nd place is Bayu Febrian. And the first winner goes to, let's take a look, Arika Unpad. Congratulations! And now, we also have prizes for the 4th and 5th winners as well. And we'll be contacting the 4th and 5th winners. We'll be showing it to you. But remember, once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you are here, don't forget to raise your hand and contact the committee if you did win the Kahoot quiz. And for those of you joining us online, remember to capture the screen if you did win the Kahoot quiz, and also contact information of the committee to redeem your prize. Once again, congratulations. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for joining us in our Kahoot quiz, both Kahoot quizzes of the day. And we'd like to also thank you for participating, and congratulations to all the winners. And ladies and gentlemen, as we have come to the end of the event, I would like to also remind you that if you did use or borrow our interpretation device, to please return it to our committee upon exiting the venue. Once again, if you did use the interpretation device, please do return it upon exiting the venue. And once again, I would like to remind to each and every one of you of the winners of the Kahoot quiz. So let's take a look once again on the screen for the winners of the 2nd Kahoot quiz. Because it appears not only the 3 winners are the ones on the podium that has won prizes, but since we are giving out prizes for today for the celebration of the Festival Ekonomi Keuangan Digital Indonesia 2023, we also have prizes for the 4th and 5th winners as well, are the runner-ups of the Kahoot quiz. So let's take a look, ladies and gentlemen. Are the winners ready to be shown? All right, as we await for the committee to show, here they are. It's Arika Unpad in 1st place, Bayu Febrian in 2nd place, Nadira P in 3rd place, Arvianti Nazila in 4th place, and Astrid in 5th place. And can I have a big round of applause? Congratulations to all the winners. And remember to contact our committee to redeem your prizes. Once again, congratulations. And ladies and gentlemen, with the end of the second day of FEKDI 2023, with the theme Forging Cross-Border Economic Interlinkage has come to an end, I would like to once again remind you of the 3 takeaways from today's Leaders Insight, brought to you by Mrs. Filianingsi Hendarta, the Deputy Governor of Bank Indonesia. First of all, we'd like to remind or probably echo on the digital economy and financial ecosystem in Indonesia and ASEAN shows a positive trend and optimistic economic outlook reflected through the signing of Regional Payment Connectivity MOU by ASEAN 5 central banks. And there are still potential challenges and also risks to the future cross-border development. And of course, in overcoming the challenges and risks, government, relevant authorities, payment industry players should come together and of course synergize in order to forge cross-border economic interlinkage, ladies and gentlemen. And with that coming to an end, I, Sarah Wayne, on behalf of the committee, would like to apologize for all their shortcomings. And I'd like to thank you, each and every one of you, for participating in today's sessions. And we all hope that today's session will be able to increase or also enrich our knowledge, also through the fruitful and insightful discussion that we had today. And of course, we hope to see you again on another occasion. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang dan sampai jumpa.